So while Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was just beginning its first season, mesmerizing children, scaring their parents, and bringing in completely unexpected amounts of cash, Japan was halfway through airing Dairanger successor, Gosei Sentai Dairanger. Focusing heavily on Chinese mythology, Dairanger told the story of a secret society of legacy warriors fighting against the resurgence of the Gorma clan, a terrorizing group of leather fetishists apparently. Led from a secret underground warehouse by the mysterious and badass Master Kaku, Ryo, Daigo, Shoji, Kazu, and Lin use their aura changers to heaven form into the Dragon Ranger, Lion Ranger, Pegasus Ranger, Kirin Ranger, and Phoenix Ranger, respectively. But they have more than just spandex costumes and mechas. These 5 were chosen due to their ability to manipulate ki to perform tasks like levitation, telekinesis, and time travel, and were kinetically linked to their mythical ki beasts. Got all that? Good. Now forget it, because it has hardly anything to do with Season 2 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The reason Dairanger gave way to Dairanger is because, well, that's what happens every year for Super Sentai. The current story comes to a close, and a new story takes its place. While mostly the same formula reigns throughout every incarnation, their plots, characters, and powers are entirely unrelated to any other series in the franchise. Dairanger itself was the 16th yearly incarnation, but Mighty Morphin Power Rangers wasn't just one story out of a franchise. The costumes, characters, Zords, and villains define Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. To this day, Season 1 is still the most iconic and recognizable part of the series, but Dairanger was over, and the Zhu 2 footage wouldn't last forever. If Saban followed Dairanger's example, they could risk alienating their audience and end up right back where they'd been a year earlier with a brand new, untested entity. But if they kept things completely the same, the series would get stale. Not to mention there wouldn't be any new toys to sell. So Season 2 of Power Rangers began in 1994, immediately where the previous season had left off. But just before Rita unleashes her next plot to take over the world, a new character shows up. Lord Zedd, Rita's never-before-mentioned superior. Disgusted by her incompetence, he seals her away again and takes most of her minions under his wing. Zedd's monsters prove too much for the Dinozords, so Zordon upgrades them to become Thunder Zords, with the ability to combine into the Thunder Megazord. However, because Tommy's powers are too weak to support an upgrade, the Dragon Zord sticks around. For now. And with that, the new status quo is set. So what just happened here? Well, a lot of things. First off, we have Zedd replacing Rita. Zedd has nothing to do with Dairanger. He's a completely American creation. But to offset the change, most of Rita's lackeys, the ones who wear full bodysuit costumes, stay on board because they don't need to be played by the same actors. This is why Scorpina essentially disappears with no explanation. She was a face character. The Thunder Zords are of course from stock footage of the mythical key beasts from Dairanger. To justify why the Power Rangers continue to wear costumes resembling their ancient animals and call upon the names of them to transform, the Thunder Zords are shown to be upgrades to the originals. So Zag's Zord isn't just the Lion Thunder Zord, it's the Mastodon Lion Thunder Zord, and Mastodon is still the basis of the power. Of course in Dairanger the lion belonged to a green-colored ranger, but fortunately it was black enough to fit. And since the Dairanger team started out as a 5-man operation, that explained why Tommy couldn't get a new Zord. Saban had really done some crazy acrobatics to keep enough, but not too much familiar. Dairanger costumes mixed with Dairanger mechas and monsters, mixed with original villains liaising with Dairanger villains? Whew! The heroes were now fighting monsters from a totally different series. This led to what I call reverse angle syndrome. For example, the early plots in Season 2 were still Zhu 2 footage. So while the actual Rangers and Dragon Zord could be seen fighting the monster, Megazord had to be edited out and shots of Thunder Megazord had to be substituted in. So you'd see Thunder Megazord perform an attack, then you'd see the enemy recoil, but you'd never actually see them together in the same shot. It was all reverse angles. For presumably all of these reasons, a lot more original Ranger footage was shot than in Season 1. As the season continued, Lord Zedd finally succeeds in exhausting the remaining Green Ranger power for good, and so Tommy has to once again step down. But it isn't long before Billy stumbles upon Zordon and Alpha secretly creating a new Ranger, the White Ranger. The team exhibits the same kind of intelligence they had when they couldn't figure out who the Green Ranger was because it's Tommy. Not only does he have a talking sword and a brand new Zord that confused with the existing Thunder Zords, Tiger Zord sold separately. Zordon makes White Ranger the new leader of the Power Rangers. Granted, I don't think making Tommy the leader was their original intention, but I'll get to why I think that in a minute. So going back to Dairanger, they eventually did get a 6th Ranger. Ko, an exuberant skateboarding boy with a tendency to molest Lin, pulls a sword out of a stone left behind by Lin's adoptive grandfather, and transforms into adult size to become the Kiba or Fang Ranger. And that was used as the basis for the White Ranger powers, making it the only Dairanger costume to make it to America. It meant there was a bit more stock footage they could now use, but now their lineup of heroes came from two entirely different series, and any time they were shown together had to be in original footage. The very next episode, 2 for 1, pretty much showed off every single tactic Power Rangers was utilizing to make this tenuous relationship work. In it, Zedd creates two monsters from two separate episodes of Dairanger. One was a purse monster that forces Shoji to learn how to better manipulate gravity. The second was a lipstick monster that develops a vendetta against Lin for scarring her face. In Power Rangers, the lipstick monster was done using reverse angle syndrome. Jason throws a sword, then we cut to a shot of the monster's face being damaged, but you never see them together. Meanwhile, the other Rangers fight against the purse, and it's all original footage, even the monster. Meanwhile, the lipstick monster enlarges, Jason calls his Zord, and now we use fully integrated Dairanger footage. Quite a bit of work, huh? Well, it was about to get even more complicated for Power Rangers, and this time it would have nothing to do with Sentai stock footage. If you listen to the costume fight scenes in 2 for 1 and some of the preceding episodes, you'll notice that Jason, Trini, and Zack don't sound anything like themselves. A few episodes later, the characters nearly stop appearing entirely except when they're in costume. And when we do see them, their backs are to the camera, they're in silhouette, or it's stock footage. Meanwhile, Billy, Tommy, and Kimberly start talking about an upcoming peace conference that will take teenagers to Switzerland. And they also meet 3 new teenagers from a neighboring school, Rocky, Aisha, and Adam, who are talented martial artists, have a propensity for wearing red, yellow, and black, and you quickly find out who the Power Rangers are. Unless you're a bit slow, or me when I was 8, you've probably already deduced that Jason, Trini, and Zack are chosen for the peace conference, and Rocky, Aisha, and Adam take their places. And you'll notice that even after they hand off their powers, Jason, Trini, and Zack are still somehow in costume up until the moment that Zordon unceremoniously whisks them away. So in case you haven't figured this part out, Austin St. John, Tui Trong, and Walter Jones weren't actually in any of these episodes at all. Behind the scenes, what's generally accepted as a story is that the actors bargained for more money, but Saban wouldn't cave, so they stopped showing up for the looping sessions, which explains why their voices sound different in the fight footage. Saban had to hire voice doubles in order to finish those episodes. But the walkout ploy didn't cause Saban to cave either. Instead, they simply fired the actors. Again, it was fortuitous that the heroes generally wore face-concealing masks, because Saban didn't need the actors to convince little children that their favorite characters were still there for a little while longer. They used the aforementioned body doubles and stock footage to maintain the illusion, while they set up the peace conference and new characters in order to make the transition in the story. I mean, it's laughable to watch this with this knowledge in mind, but at the same time, based on what we now know of the series as a whole, it's a fascinating coincidence. All season up to this point, Power Rangers had been using reverse angle syndrome and other camera tricks constantly to try to convince its audience that American actors and Japanese actors were interacting together. Now, they were suddenly having to do the same thing for their own footage to make it look like their departed actors were interacting with their current actors. It had become their MO. But it's because of all this that I firmly believe that Tommy's promotion to leader was only done to facilitate the transition. It certainly doesn't fit in the context of the story.
May I assume that you are pleased with the new leader of the power team?
This is great.
If you notice, when Zordon, in passing no less, states that Tommy's the leader, Jason shows absolutely no surprise. This despite the fact that the plotline of an entire episode in Season 1 had Jason and Tommy fighting over who would make the better leader. Also, only a few episodes before White Ranger, in Missing Green, when Jason was blaming himself for Tommy's power loss due to his inability to get the green candle in the previous season, Zordon gives him a pep talk by commending Jason's leadership skills. On the other hand, Tommy becoming the leader makes perfect sense from a production standpoint. By the time this episode was completed, Jason, Trini, and Zack were already being dubbed by other actors, which meant that they were gone from the show, and their roles in subsequent episodes would have to be limited to hide that. The voice doubles weren't a perfect match by a long shot.
Zordon, we can't go to the peace conference. Not now.
There has to be another way.
So it was best to also limit their speaking roles in costume. But Jason was the leader and had the most lines and gave all the orders. But if Tommy was the leader, then Jason could conceivably stand in the background and not say much without it being conspicuous. Jason's reaction is so generic and Zordon's revelation so downplayed that I suspect the original line simply referred to the new member of the power team, not the leader. Also note that the one time you see the entire original cast morph together after Tommy becomes the White Ranger, it's still Jason in front giving the command that it's Morphin time, lending further evidence to the theory that Tommy wasn't made the leader until after Austin St. John had left the show. However, in White Ranger's debut, Tommy does initiate it. That could disprove my theory, but on the other hand, it could just be because it was a very Tommy-centric episode. So, with the changeover complete, Power Rangers could get back to what it did best. Well, the same thing, only a little bit less of it. It was a bit odd that the rookie Red Ranger Rocky seemed to be in charge of the 5 basic Thunderzords over the more experienced Billy and Kimberly, but why shake things up more than you have to? Also notice that Tommy immediately replaces his entire green wardrobe with brand new white clothes. Before Season 2 came to an end, Saban had one more obstacle to work around. Parents were complaining that Lord Zedd, with his monstrous voice and sinewy body, was too scary for their children. To remedy this, they brought Rita back to counterbalance Zedd's supposed scariness. She concocted a love potion to make Zedd fall in love with her, and they got married, working together to fight the Power Rangers. But as you know, Rita was actually stock footage of Bandora from Zyuranger, and like Scorpina, she was a face character. But they easily worked around that by hiring a new actress, keeping the same voice actress, and saying that Rita got a makeover to make herself more attractive to Zedd, thereby explaining her changed appearance. And like Season 1, Season 2 ended without even attempting to wrap anything up. But it was probably for the best. Saban had surely been run ragged in Season 2 while with combining multiple shows together in the same continuity and covering up the departure of their lead actors. And they had to shoot so much original footage to facilitate this that it makes one wonder why they didn't just make their own show from scratch, since they practically already were. But that wasn't going to stop them from doing the exact same thing all over again in Season 3.